My name is Ethan Vale. I'm 23 and I work 3 jobs. Right now, I'm on the night shift because nights pay a little more. Everything in my life pays a little more if I'm willing to give up a little more sleep. 2 years ago, my father died. He left us his debts, and he left my mother a 1-bedroom apartment and a pile of bills she still hasn't finished crying over. So I dropped out. University can wait. Rent cannot. I don't remember the last time I bought something without checking the price first. I don't remember the last time I slept without doing math in my head. I do remember the exact moment everything changed. It was a Tuesday, or maybe a Wednesday. I was too tired to tell. The door chimed. A man in an expensive coat walked in, phone to his ear, annoyed. He said, "I told you, the deal is done. I don't care what the market says. I don't buy on feelings." He bought a bottle of water, paid with a black card, and left. As the door closed, I noticed something on the counter. A watch. Silver, heavy, expensive looking. The kind a man like that wears without thinking about it. I picked it up and the world shifted. A translucent blue interface flickered into existence over the watch. Sharp, precise, impossible. Item: Varenne automatic watch. Market value $8,400. True value $73. Condition: replica. I blinked, rubbed my eyes. I told myself, I need to sleep. I'm hallucinating. I set the watch down and the interface faded. I looked again. It snapped back. The numbers didn't blur. They didn't shake. They just sat there, like they'd been waiting for me to notice. The door slammed open. The customer was back, furious. He shouted, "The watch! I left my watch. It's worth $10,000. If it's not exactly where I left it, I'm calling the police." I handed it over without a word. $10,000, he said, but the numbers in front of me said 73. For the first time in my life, I knew something a rich man didn't. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one who was wrong. It wasn't gone when I woke up. It wasn't a dream. It followed me. Every object I looked at had 2 numbers now, what the world thought it was worth and what it actually was. My laptop, market value $310, true value $180. My phone, $420, true value $95. I scanned the room. Every single object carried 2 numbers. My mother was in the kitchen making tea. She said, "You were home late, again. You should sleep more, Ethan." I said, "I will, after this week." She said, "You said that last week." Then she smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. The power bill came. I paid half. I'll get the rest Friday. My eyes drifted to her neck, a thin gold chain with a small pendant. The interface flickered. Item: mother's necklace. Market value $14. True value $2,870. I froze. $14. That's what a pawn shop would give her. But the other number, the one that had never once been wrong, said 2,870. I asked to borrow it. She looked puzzled, but she unclasped it and handed it over. That night, I sat at my desk with the necklace under a lamp, and I started searching. There was a tiny maker's mark stamped into the metal. I typed it into a search engine, and I stayed up all night. I searched the mark. I searched the chain. I searched every forum about vintage jewelry I could find. The workshop had closed 6 years ago. Nobody famous, nobody important, but somewhere along the way, a small circle of collectors had decided its pieces were worth keeping, and the price had gone up, quietly, patiently, while the rest of the world still saw a $14 necklace. The numbers are real. That was the thought I couldn't get past. The numbers are real, and if I can see what something is truly worth before anyone else can, then being poor isn't permanent. I didn't sell the necklace. It's my mother's, and it's the only nice thing she owns. But I finally understood. She'd been wearing $2,000 around her neck for years, calling herself broke. So I made a list. Flea markets, pawn shops, garage sales, estate sales. I have 100 appraisals a day. I still need to learn what to look for, but now I can see. My name is Ethan Vale. I can see the true value of everything, and I'm done being poor. The next weekend, I hit the flea market at dawn, hands in my pockets, eyes moving. A lamp, $3, worth $3. A painting, $50, worth $50. Nothing. I kept walking, appraising as I went. A vase, $8, worth $8. A stack of vinyl, $12, worth $15. Barely worth it. I was learning the rhythm. Everywhere around me, people were blind to what I could see. Then I saw it, an old cardboard box of cameras on a junk table. My eyes landed on one camera buried inside. The interface flickered. An appraisal began to form. Vintage camera, seller $3, market value $41, true value $6,820, and below it, a glitching line I couldn't read, hidden attribute, error. I crouched down, reached into the box, and closed my fingers around the camera. The interface flared over my hand, a $3 camera worth nearly $7,000, and a hidden value the system couldn't even read. I lifted it out, worn, unremarkable. I turned it over in my hands while the number glowed, $6,820. The stall owner was half asleep on a folding chair. I held up the camera and asked, "How much?" He didn't even look up, $3. I handed over 3 worn dollar bills. The camera was mine. I walked away, the interface following me, whispering numbers I still didn't fully understand. I examined the camera more closely as I walked. I opened the back and found a small compartment. Inside, an undeveloped roll of film. The interface flickered again, and that unreadable line glitched harder. I held the canister up to the light. The error, the film, the hidden value, they were connected. I looked toward a photo developing shop across the street. I handed the film to a bored clerk and waited. The clock on the wall ticked. I'd spent $3 on a camera. If I was wrong, I'd lost $3. If I was right... The clerk came back with an envelope of prints. I opened it and my breath caught. Striking, decades-old photographs, an era captured, the early work of a genius. I researched the photographer that night. The style matched his early work exactly. The interface hummed over the prints, true value climbing and climbing. My hands were shaking. I took the prints to a specialist dealer. He examined them under a loupe, slowly, carefully. Then he made an offer. I signed the paperwork. Payment, $5,400 after fees. I stood outside the dealer with a check in my hand. I looked at it, really looked. My phone, the banking app, a balance so far beyond $43.17 that I almost laughed. I paid the bills, every overdue notice stamped paid. I bought groceries without checking the price. My hand didn't flinch at the total. For the first time in 2 years, I could breathe. That night, I found one of my mother's overdue debts online. I paid it off anonymously. She'd never know. I didn't want her to know. I just wanted it gone. I sat at my desk, the notebook open. Flea markets, pawn shops, auctions, estate sales. This wasn't luck. It was information, and I could see it before anyone else. I stood up. My posture had changed. Less tired, more focused. The city glittered through the window, and the interface flared in my eyes, sharp blue. This was only the beginning. A week later, an invitation arrived. A private collectibles auction. I held the card, considering. Across the room, a shadowed figure watched me. I didn't see him, not yet. A month ago, I learned I could see the true value of everything. Now I was learning that the value of everything didn't matter, not if you didn't know what to do with it. I worked every place the world throws away the things it doesn't understand. I'd appraise, buy, sell, repeat. The numbers never lied. but the numbers never told me the whole story either. A box of old toys at an estate sale, $40. The system said $1,800. A watch in a pawn shop, priced like a knockoff, $120. The system said $2,400. The same lie I'd caught in that convenience store, repeated 1,000 times a day. The world was full of people selling treasure for the price of trash, and I was getting very good at buying it. My mother doesn't ask questions. She just notices. She said, "You look less tired lately, and your shoes are new." I said, "I've been sleeping." She said, "Good. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." Storage auctions were different. You bid on a unit you can't see inside. The numbers didn't reach through the locked door. I had to guess like everyone else until the door rolled up. I won that unit for $350, and inside, under the dust, I found a box, a small collectible the system read at $6,500. Then I found the vase, a mid-century piece in a closing antique shop. True value, $9,000. I bought it for $90. And then I couldn't sell it. Not to the dealers, not online, not anywhere. A dealer told me, "Beautiful piece, but nobody collects that maker anymore." Worth isn't money. Worth is a number waiting for a buyer, and some numbers wait forever. The system told me what it was worth. It never told me why or who would pay. I found the buyer 3 weeks later, buried in a forum thread. He paid $8,500. I made $8,410, and it cost me more time than the other wins combined. The system sees worth. I still had to do the work. That's when I saw her, Mina Park. We'd sat in the same finance seminar before I dropped out. She'd stayed, I'd left. We hadn't spoken in a year. She said, "Ethan, I almost didn't recognize you." I said, "I look the same." She said, "No, you look like you sleep now. In class, you never slept." The interface flickered over her before I could stop it. Current value, $29,000. Potential, $86 million. Financial intelligence, S. Risk management, S+. I'd appraised 100,000 objects. This was the first time the number looked back at me. She asked how I'd been, and all I could see was a figure, and I hated that I'd looked. She said, "New phone, and you paid for my coffee before I could reach for my card." "Ethan, what are you doing these days?" I said, "A little of everything, buying and selling." She said, "Buying and selling what?" I said, "Things people don't know the value of." She laughed and said, "That's either a great business or a terrible one." I said, "I need someone who understands money better than I do." She said, "Pay me to do what exactly?" I said, "Help me not be stupid with it." I didn't tell her about the system. I couldn't, but I handed her my books, the buying, the selling, the margins, and she did what she always did. She found the pattern. She said, "Ethan, these margins don't make sense. You know what things are worth before you buy them." She was one sentence away from the truth. I should have been scared. Instead, I was relieved. I said, "I have a good eye." She said, "That's not an eye. That's something else." Then she said, "I won't ask, but I need the numbers, all of them." The invitation had been sitting on my desk for a week. A private collectibles auction, members only. Mina saw it and said, "You're going, right?" I said, "I don't belong in a room like that." She said, "Ethan, you buy things nobody understands. That's literally what an auction is." She made me set a budget and write it down. $8,000, absolute ceiling. She said, "Promise me, I've seen what you do when you get excited." I said, "I don't get excited." I promised. I meant it. I just didn't know what was waiting in that room. The auction house smelled like old money and older furniture. I appraised the room without thinking. The rugs, the lamps, the watches on the wrists of men who'd never checked a price in their lives. And then my eyes landed on a woman in black, and the interface went dark. I tried again, same thing. Appraisal failed, insufficient authority. For the first time since the night shift, I was blind. She caught me staring and said, "Are you appraising me?" I said, "I don't know what you mean." She said, "Everyone appraises everyone here. Most people are just worse at hiding it." Then a man in a tailored suit stepped up and said, "New blood. You were doing math." I said, "I was just looking." He said, "That's what I do for a living. I'm Marcus Vane. I appraise things." Then he smiled, and it didn't reach his eyes, and he said, "I'll be watching." The auction began. I took a seat near the back, and I waited. Lot after lot went by. A clock, a bureau, a set of china. I let them pass. The interface stayed quiet. I was waiting for something the room didn't know it had. Then the painting came up. A landscape, unremarkable, attributed to a minor provincial artist. The room barely stirred. And then the interface changed. For the first time, I saw a new line. Future value, $4.7 million. Probability, 71%. The system had never shown me that before. I kept my face still. I bid like a man buying a painting he liked. Not too fast, not too eager. The room let me have it cheap. $7,500, under the ceiling Mina had set, and worth 100 times that before the decade was out. As the gavel fell, I felt two pairs of eyes on me. Marcus, curious, calculating, filing me away, and Serena, watching me the way I'd been watching her. Like she was trying to read a number I couldn't hide. She came up to me as I collected the painting and said, "You bid on that painting like you already knew what it was." I said, "I like the colors." She said, "No, you bid on it like you'd been waiting for it. You didn't even blink." That night, I carried the painting home, a $4.7 million secret wrapped in brown paper. And I couldn't stop thinking about the woman I couldn't appraise, the one person in the world whose value I couldn't see, the one person who might already see mine. I'd carried home a secret worth $4.7 million, wrapped in brown paper. All night I'd stared at it, waiting for the number to change. So in the morning, I did what any sane man would do. I looked again. The interface came to life over the painting. True value, future value, and at the bottom a new field I'd never seen before. The new field resolved, and I read it twice because it made no sense. It didn't say dollars, it didn't say days, it just said, paid. The pain hit behind my eyes, sharp as a knife. A drop of blood hit the floor. I'd read the future twice now, and twice I'd paid for it. The system never told me the price, it just took it. So I stopped looking. $4.7 million, 71%. Every time I checked the number, it took a little more out of me. Some secrets you pay for every time you look. I was starting to understand that the system never gave anything away for free. Mina found me that afternoon with my ledgers spread across the table. She'd been running my numbers for a month, and she always found the one line I was trying to avoid. She said, "You have $31,000 in cash and a painting you won't sell. Then sell it." I said, "It's worth more than I paid, a lot more." She said, "Lock it in. You can run 100 flips with that cash." I said, "I'm not selling it yet." She leaned forward and said, "You're not investing in a painting. You're gambling on a future you can't prove. Part of the time, you lose everything. I need you to hear that." I heard it. I just couldn't tell her the number I'd already seen. I said, "I need a real appraiser to authenticate it." She said, "Fine, but I'm watching the numbers." The only question left was whether the woman I needed could see what I'd seen. I called the one person who might understand, Serena Voss. She received me in a private gallery, dark wood, glass cases, quiet light, the kind of room where price was a religion. She said, "The man who bid on a provincial landscape like he'd been waiting for it. I wondered if I'd see you again. I said, I need an authentication. I want to know if it's real. She said, 2,000 and an answer. To what question? I asked. She stepped closer and said, you bid on that painting before the room had even decided it was boring. You looked like you already knew. How? I said, I have a good eye. She smiled and said, so does Marcus Vane. He still needs a loop and an hour. Then she met my eyes and said, I'm deciding whether you're a lucky amateur or the most dangerous person in the room. She pulled on white gloves and went to work over the canvas, tracing brushwork, holding a loop to the pigment. I should have been watching the painting. I was watching her. Without looking up, she said, you're not watching the painting, you're watching me. That's either flattering or you're appraising me. I said, and you? What are you doing? She straightened and said, the attribution says minor provincial, but the pigment is wrong for that. If I'm right, someone misattributed a master's early work. I'll know in a week. A week. The word landed harder than she knew. I'd already paid to see the future once. Waiting was a different kind of cost, and I was starting to understand the system charged in more than one currency. I counted out her fee, $2,000. Her fingers didn't quite touch mine when she took it, but she watched me wrap the painting like a man handling a fortune, because that's exactly what it was. At the door, she said, you should understand waiting better than anyone, Ethan Vale. I didn't turn around, but I could feel her watching me all the way out. 3 days later, Marcus Vane found me. He'd gathered an audience, collectors, dealers, people who came to watch a rookie get carved up. He said, I'll give you $12,000 for the landscape. I said, it's not for sale. He smiled and said, everything's for sale. That's the whole point of people like us. He said, 3 objects, 3 appraisals, best of 3. If I win, you sell me the painting for what you paid. If you win, I pay you $15,000 and I stop circling it. I said, and if I say no? He said, then you're the amateur everyone thinks you are. Amateur. It was a trap and I knew it. Win and everyone asks how a dropout appraises faster than Marcus Vane. Lose and I hand over the future for the price of a used car. But he'd said the one word I couldn't walk away from. Round 1. A porcelain vase. Marcus worked it with a loop. I read the true value from the interface and pretended to study. I won by a hair. He didn't look rattled. He looked interested. Round 2. A bronze figure. Marcus caught it from across the room. A forgery. He described the casting flaws like he'd made them himself. The interface agreed with him. I called it fake on instinct. He called it fake with proof. He won the round and the room nodded like they'd expected it. Marcus Vane didn't need an interface. He was the thing the system had given me. And watching him, I felt something I hadn't felt since the night shift. Jealousy. Round 3. The final object was a painted panel, damaged, cracked, unloved. The room dismissed it before it hit the table. Marcus said, worthless. But when I looked, the interface didn't just stir, it burned. The panel was worth $400 today, but the system showed me what it would be worth. $210,000, probability 64%, and the cost of the reading, paid. Pain hit like a spike behind my eye. Blood ran from my nose. I wrote the number anyway, the one no appraiser in that room could have seen, because I wanted to win. I won. The room went quiet, and Marcus didn't look beaten. He looked like a man who'd just found the thing he'd been hunting his whole life, the one thing he couldn't see. He slid $15,000 across the table and said, worth it. Now I know you're not lucky, you're something else, and I'm going to figure out what. Afterward, I leaned against a wall in the corridor, pressing my nose with a bloodied hand. Then I heard footsteps, Serena out of the shadows. She said, you should see a doctor about that. I said, it's nothing, adrenaline. She said, it's not adrenaline. You went pale in the 3rd round, and you wrote the number like you'd already seen it. She said, "The panel is worth $400 today. You wrote what it becomes." I said, "You're giving me too much credit." She said, "I don't give credit. I read people, and you are the first person I've ever met that I couldn't price." The woman I couldn't appraise had just told me she couldn't price me either. 2 blind spots, standing in the dark. She said, "Maybe that's why I can't stop looking at you." She pressed her card into my hand, her fingers lingering a beat too long. "The authentication will be done soon," she said. But there was something else in her eyes, a warning she hadn't said yet. At the end of the corridor, she turned back. "Be careful who else is watching. In my world, a man who can see what others can't is a resource, and resources get acquired." That night, I walked home with the painting under my arm. Across the street, a shadowed figure stood watching, the same one from the flea market. I tried to read him. Appraisal failed. Insufficient authority. Same as her. Then my phone buzzed, a message with no sender. "Stop using the future. It costs more than you think." When I looked up, he was gone, and I was alone with a $4.7 million painting and a cost counter that was still counting. Serena Voss set down her loupe over my painting, and the verdict was done. The woman I couldn't appraise had just proven what I already knew, that a fortune had been hiding in brown paper for 200 years. She said, "It's real, a master's early work, misattributed for 2 centuries. Whoever sold it to you for $7,500 was asleep at the table." Then she looked up. "You weren't." I already knew the number, $250,000, and I'd paid $7,500. But hearing her say it made it real in a way the interface never could. The system told me what it was worth. She could prove why. Then she said, "A buyer has been asking about this painting," quietly, the kind who doesn't like the word no. I said, "I'm not selling." She asked why. Because the system had shown me $4.7 million 5 years out, but I couldn't tell her that. So I told her the truth I could afford. I said, "I've seen what it becomes." She studied me for a long time and said, "You're the first person in a year who looked at $250,000 and didn't blink." What she couldn't see was the cost, the nosebleeds, the black spots, the shadowed man's warning running under everything: "Stop using the future." But the number was real, and I wasn't ready to walk away from it. At the door, she said, "A man who buys a fortune for pennies is a story. And in my world, stories get bought too." I didn't answer. I just knew, walking out, that she was right. The next morning, I went back to what was safe: objects. A film studio was clearing out its backlot, and I was there to flip props and costumes for nothing. Ordinary, safe. Then a door opened across the lot. A young woman stepped out of a casting room, dark hair, elegant features, head high but her eyes hollow. A casting assistant followed, already looking past her. "We'll call you," he said. "Don't wait by the phone." The moment my eyes landed on her, the interface did something it had never done before. It didn't show me an object. It showed me her, human value, a new level I didn't know existed. $740 million of potential, walking away from a room that had just told her not to wait by the phone, and a growth probability so low it was a rounding error. The world had decided she was worth nothing. The system said the opposite. I read her future the way I'd read the paintings, and the price nearly put me on my knees. Objects don't fight back. People are heavier. In that second, I understood what the shadowed man meant. Seeing what a human could become is the most expensive thing the system does. Blood ran from my nose and the lot doubled. I caught myself against a stack of crates and wiped my lip. I just paid for a future I wasn't supposed to see without asking, and I was only getting started. I should have walked away. That was the sane thing. But I'd seen the number and I couldn't unsee it. So I did the thing the shadowed man would have warned me not to do. I followed her. I crossed the lot, wiping the last of the blood, and called out. She stopped at the gate and turned. and I could see the guard come up in her eyes before I'd even opened my mouth. We sat in a cafe across from the lot, 2 coffees going cold between us. She sat with her arms folded, like she'd been sold too many dreams by too many men in cheap suits. She said, "Whatever you're selling, I can't afford it." I said, "I'm not selling anything, I'm buying." "Buying what?" she said. "You," I said. She laughed, cold and tired, like she'd heard that line 100 times. I said, "No portfolio, no fees. I front 10,000, a signing bonus and 6 weeks of coaching, headshots, wardrobe. In exchange, 15% of your future earnings. Real, enforceable. You keep your dignity and your percentages." She went quiet. Then she asked the only question that mattered. "Why me?" And I gave her the only answer I could say out loud. Because nobody else will. Nina called me that night, and she didn't bother with hello. "You do not invest in a human being," she said. "You invest in assets. Assets have balance sheets. This girl has a blacklist and a prayer." I said, "She's an asset, Mina. The most undervalued one I've ever found." She said, "What happens when she fails? You lose 10,000 and a person who trusted you." I said, "I'm not betting on her failing. I'm betting she was never given a chance." The contract was clean. I watched Yuna read every line, her hand hovering over the pen. Then, with a hand that still trembled slightly, she signed. She slid the contract across the table and said, "If you're wrong about me, you lose everything you put in." I said, "I've been wrong before. It usually costs less than this." For the first time, something like trust crossed her face. I signed my name under a number only I could see. My name is Ethan Vale, and for the first time in my life, I had invested in a human being. It felt less like a deal and more like the start of something I couldn't take back. Then the doors started closing. Auditions, agencies, calls that never came. Yuna was good, better than good, and still, everywhere we knocked, the answer was the same. Not you. Mina found it before I did. "It's not bad luck," she said. "It's a blacklist. Every casting director in the city has been told not to see her. The order traces back to one agency, a family with its name on half the screens in the city. The Lawrence, old money, Isabella Lawrence family. The system had shown me a door, and a family of billionaires was standing in front of it. I'd never met the heiress, but I had just made myself her problem. The system can't tell me the path. It only tells me what something is worth. So I looked at the auditions like an appraiser instead of an agent. And there was one role, a small part, but a face a director had been hunting for months. Every actress he'd seen was wrong. Yuna Seo wasn't wrong. The blacklist kept her out of his room, so I used the one lever I had. I went to Serena Voss. "I need a door," I said. She smiled and said, "Fine, but I'm collecting on this someday." She made the call herself. I watched the one person I couldn't read work a connection I didn't have. When she hung up, she said, "The door's open. Don't waste it." The audition room was a long table and 3 jaded faces. Yuna stepped in understated, unprepared looking. A producer checked his watch. Then she began, and the room leaned forward. I'd seen the number, but I'd never seen the talent. The system says, acting S+, the way it says a vase is worth $400. Cold, clinical. But watching her, $740 million wasn't theoretical anymore. It was standing right in front of me. She finished, and the room went still, then broke into quiet approval. The director slowly rose, his months of searching over, and somewhere else, a phone rang in a dark office. Someone was circling a name, mine. That evening, Yuna stepped out of the studio dazed. "I got it," she said, her voice cracking. "One scene, but I got it." Then she asked the question again. "You believed in me first. Why?" I said, "I saw something." "What did you see?" she asked. The truth was on my tongue. The number, the probability, the whole impossible machinery. I almost told her. Instead, I said, someone who deserved a door. The cost caught up with me in the taxi home. My nose wouldn't stop bleeding. The streetlights doubled. I'd started reading people, and I was beginning to understand that was the point of no return. The shadowed man was waiting on my street. You've started looking at people, he said. That was the line you weren't supposed to cross. Who are you? I asked. He didn't answer. He never does. They'll come for you now, he said. The ones who block people like her don't like it when someone unblocks them. Then he asked the question that stayed with me. Ask who collects the price when you look. When I looked up, he was gone. My phone glowed in my hand, a message with no sender, just a name and a question. The appraiser who never loses. Interesting. And it was signed I.L. Isabella Laurent, the heiress whose family I'd just walked a blacklisted actress through, had noticed the nobody who never loses. I'd spent the whole day buying a future for a girl everyone had written off. Now the most dangerous person in the city was asking how I'd done it. My name is Ethan Vale. I can see the true value of everything. I just learned that the most expensive thing in the world to look at is another human being.